welcome, everyone. Great to have Kerry Barrett back again. And I know we probably connected many years ago, and we definitely stayed in touch.
Yeah.
And I know you had me on one of your programs a while ago, and I've been very interested to see kind of the evolution as to what you've been doing from being, in front of the news camera to kind of being as a solopreneur. So I actually changed my name to Introverted Heart on here from the past.
I was noticing that. I like it.
Because that's kind of who I am. I might as well just put it out there.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get a sense. We were just talking before about some of your latest projects. Feel free to share how you've actually, gotten past, some of, or what are the challenges you have right now with that?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, you and I think, sort of originally became aware of one another when I was working on air at NBC in New York City. We're both in that general area of the country, the Northeast. And it was about 4-ish years ago now that I left the news industry and started my own thing, which has morphed a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it due to COVID, a lot of it due to the fact that I had absolutely zero idea what I was doing when I first started my business. And, none of it, actually. It's not just that I didn't know what my business was. I knew nothing about business, period. And it's finally found, I think, a spot that is very needs driven, but also it can make ample use of my skills. So I do have smaller programs where I work with, business owners and podcast hosts and people looking to up-level their media appearances and their on-camera speaking, because they do a lot of, on-camera work. But the two sort of bigger areas of focus right now are executives, and the biggest of all is working with lawyers and law firms. And it's interesting, we were talking a little bit before the show that I didn't necessarily seek out working with that particular industry or that particular niche, but I did have lawyers who were some of my very first clients when I first started, before I even really had an offer. And I have found them to have sort of found me naturally through LinkedIn or, referral or whatever. And they sort of showed up and needed help. And so I've started to now focus very specifically on that particular industry, understanding certainly the challenges that come along with highly targeted training that they go through as, law students and associates, et cetera, which great for the courtroom for adversarial conversation, not necessarily great for visibility or client and lead generation, especially in the digital era or on media, webinars, et cetera. But the way that they're trained to speak doesn't necessarily lend itself to those types of communications. So there is a need. And then, of course, AI, which the legal industry is not the only one that is going to be affected by AI, but it is more affected than most other industries. There was I think a study put out by Goldman Sachs that says the legal industry is going to be the one that is most affected by the growth and development of AI in both positive and negative ways. So now you got to get in front of more clients and bring more in, or change your pricing model in the way that you charge your clients entirely.
There's definitely a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of AI stuff. I know one of the challenges I have, like, it's a great reference tool, but you have to be really careful in terms of content. And I think the most important thing of all is to really understand what your sweet spot is. We were having a discussion before in a different event, and I know what I can and can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know what I can trust myself to do, and I have to be able to reach out to other people when it comes to things. I'm not going to promise myself to do everything, because that just puts me in a bad light.
Right.
And I think that's one of the challenges that we all, like, your sweet spot is your sweet spot. Mine is in a different one. And we can definitely complement each other. But that's the most important thing, is to know what you're good at and not good at, and that you can focus, on your business that way.
Yeah, in your zone of genius, rather than constantly trying to recreate the wheel or spool yourself up on another area and then trying to deliver it to a client.
I know one of the things during the pandemic, especially, there were so many interviews that were done on video. And we talked back then a lot about the settings and things and all of that. I think that's probably evolved a little bit now, but one of the challenges that I still find is that people still don't know how to present themselves.
Yeah.
In some ways. And there was actually a comment on LinkedIn, which I'd be curious to get your sense about. There was an article about someone who had all the criteria for the position. They were qualified, they did everything, except they weren't wearing lipstick. And that was that was a woman HR person who said that was a down thing. You dressed well, you were appropriate for it. And I thought to myself, what does that really say? That you don't have lipstick or that you don't have makeup on. And the guys on there are like, it didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot. And what does that really say about you as someone being qualified or not, if you're going to be judged that way? And I get the feeling that may happen from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, 100% it does. It was interesting. I was just doing a talk actually this past weekend for a large law firm. You know, this is a multinational law firm, and their attorneys are, you know, the best of the best. And during this keynote presentation, we were talking specifically about you showing up on camera, you know, leveraging those skills for webinars and media and, you know, podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. And it was women, and this is not going along with what you say, women were still quite concerned about what colors do I wear, and you know, what sort of makeup do I wear, and what does my background need to look like? Which is not to say that the men didn't necessarily have those questions. They may have and just didn't ask them, but there is still a sense, and I think it's multi-layered. It's not just, you know, we're more concerned about what we look like, but, you know, we know the studies from when the pandemic first hit and how plastic surgery sort of skyrocketed because we're all coming face to face with our own image for 8 hours a day. And we became unhappy with what we saw. But also, I think there's still a sense of, as a woman, I'm expected to look a certain way, or, you know, have put this much time into my appearance. And it's such an outdated mode of thinking. It has nothing to do with your ability to show up and do the job. I will say, though, especially for the younger generation, there tends to be almost an entire 180 from that method or that mode of thinking. So, for example, there's actually another law firm that I work with, a little bit smaller, also based in New Jersey, and their challenge is not necessarily that they're more seasoned attorneys and their partners are struggling with how to show up and clothes to wear and makeup and that sort of stuff, but their younger associates are going to virtual court in hoodies, and because this is how they've grown up, and there's not a sense of formality, or there's not the same sense of formality. So the rule of thumb is, if you're going to be doing professional, certainly client-facing work on a video call, show up the same way that you would show up in a conference room or in their place of work when you're having a, you know, in-person meeting. That always means, unfortunately, for women, there's going to be a little more prep time. We haven't quite gotten to the place where we don't necessarily have to worry as much about doing our hair, you know.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot so much, but this is a question that I get a lot from people that are looking for a job. I mean, a lot of people, like, we talk about age discrimination a lot, which I think is kind of like a fallback to how you have to come across. But I think age discrimination works both ways. People just getting out of school have a different type of discrimination. And
absolutely.
And I think it's just the way our society is. That's one of the reasons I became a solopreneur, is because I just didn't want to deal with corporate anymore.
Yeah.
To be honest.
We've made strides, but we haven't fully gotten there yet. That's for sure. Yeah. And it's always going to be a personal component to that decision and how you want to show up anyway.
All right. So just to let people know, there may be an issue with LinkedIn today with the buffering. Again, what would a day be on LinkedIn without something going on?
Without some sort of problem, right?
That's what happens all the time. I know LinkedIn is eventually going to be rolling out its own platform here to do this.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is that you put yourself in the best light possible, and you have only certain things you can control.
Yep.
You know, you can't control everything. I think we talked last time about if you have a video set up to make sure you have another way to get back in touch with people,
Mhm.
having a backup plan.
Yep.
I've actually had a couple of these sessions go out on me because of a power failure.
Oh, I had that happen to me on a master class one time. I had a huge webinar set up and our power went down and I had to reschedule and it was a total pain in the butt. Yeah.
And then the other thing is LinkedIn actually went down for us.
Yeah. Oh, really?
LinkedIn actually went down, and a bunch of us were just texting each other off to the side. Is it just me? Is it just me?
Oh,
Because we
no.
couldn't be on LinkedIn.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
the idea is to just kind of go with the flow,
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah, I pull from my news experience there, and it's a similar motto in the entertainment industry, which is the show must go on. So, however you get the show on is how it goes on, and some days it may not be as pretty as it is other days, but that's fine. And that's part of being a good speaker, regardless of whether you're a lawyer and you're looking to speak on camera or you're a public speaker, is adaptability, reading the room, figuring out how to handle those moments, being able to ad lib or create some sort of extemporaneous conversation so that you can keep the show going.
Yeah, and for me, I actually started as a writer many
Yeah.
years ago. I was never in IT. I was
Mhm.
a newspaper reporter. I used to go to events and go to meetings and things, and that's how I started to get the questioning, which
Yeah.
then lent itself when I went into IT to learn what questions to ask.
Sure.
Um,
Yep.
and a lot of us, we were in a much different place than before. I mean, do you miss the news industry at all?
No. Would you like
No.
me to elaborate? Not even a tiny bit. I will put some fine print on that.
Okay, sure.
I don't miss I do miss rather the people that I work with. I am barring a few experiences, none of them at NBC. I worked with some of the best of the best, not just at their craft, but also just as people. And a newsroom back in its heyday certainly was a place that was just pulsing with energy. There were dozens of people working on dozens plus of stories, and they all, because people in that industry have worked and lived all over the country as part of their career progression, you have a ton of different viewpoints, you have lots of diversity, different cultures, perspectives, experiences. They're all, generally speaking, very witty, they're quick on their feet, they're interesting people. That's why most of them are on TV or are creating stories as producers, and that part I absolutely love. I feel like I'm a better person and my skills are sharper. I think more quickly when I'm in that sort of environment, and it encourages me to also be my best. I learned as much about being on camera from actually being on camera as I did from being around the people in that industry. The newsroom is a very different place though now than it was when I first started, or even than it was 10 years ago. The news industry itself is in a state of contraction. It has been for a long time. We may have talked about this in some of our previous lives, ever since really the advent of the interwebs to
Right.
the the masses. And certainly since social media, people have not had to sit down for appointment viewing for news. And then the audience, of course, is more fractured. So you have more shows and they're in more day parts and there's more
Right.
channels to choose from. So every slice of that pie is just a little bit smaller. One of the things that is interesting about that, though, that works in my clients' favor if they are looking to be on TV, is many of my clients are older and they're lawyers who are working with top level CEOs who also are generally not people in their 20s and 30s. They're people in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And they are watching traditional legacy media, and certainly they're watching business cable media. So Fox Business, they're watching CNBC. And because the industry is in a state of contraction, there's not as many producers, there's not as many reporters, there's not as much content that is recorded and edited on tape, if you will. They're looking to fill time with guests and contributors, which means there is a whole bunch of opportunity for guests and contributors to appear and then be positioned as the subject matter expert, the go-to, more visibility, more opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a ton of opportunity there because generally speaking, my clients, target clients are watching those types of programs.
So one question that came up from Lori Walker, she's out in California. Any tips for overcoming nerves?
Oh gosh, Lori, that's I work with people for a long time to try and overcome the nerves. It's not a one, do this thing and you will, get over it. One of the things that I start with, generally speaking, is a grounding process or procedure, and what works for one person may not work for another. So when I work with clients, I come up with very bespoke curriculums for them for my programs. But if you need a quick, this is something you can consider doing before you hop on, in front of a camera or you have a media appearance. It's a simple breathing exercise. Visualize what you want to happen. I breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. It's a breathing technique created by Dr. Wheel, who is a holistic health practitioner, and it's really designed to slow down your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. And then recognize this. There is no perfect way to do it. This is the biggest change for most people. There is no perfect way to be on camera or to speak in front of a podium. It has zilch to do with how many ums and ahs you say, unless they're really distracting. It's really about who you are, meeting your audience where they are and meeting their needs and putting the audience at the forefront. If you're able to put the audience at the forefront, you are now out of your own head and you are not thinking about, what I'm saying stupid, or am I using my hands in the wrong way, or am I making enough eye contact with people in the audience? Once you just start thinking about how to deliver the message in a way that's most beneficial to them, it helps you remove yourself from, that inner head trash or that inner demon that's constantly making you aware of every mistake you made. Again, not a one, I'm going to practice this for a day and then I'm going to be over it. The nerves will never fully go away, is what I'm saying. At the end of the day, you'll always have them, but think of them as excitement instead.
I mean, I kind of know what my triggers are because I still freak out.
Yeah.
For each one of these.
Yeah.
I totally freak out.
Do you? Yeah.
I do. So what I've learned over time is I'm not going to eat anything until this is over. I'm not going to drink anything until this is over.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go about this very focused.
Right.
Because I don't want anything to be distracting. And that's just me.
I do the same thing. I when I had this big speaking engagement over the weekend, I got there early as I always do, so that I can set up and I can practice and I can sort of get into my zone. And they offered me something to eat, which I don't do before I speak either. Camera, not so much. I was eating cookies probably 30 seconds before I hopped onto this call. But you don't look nervous. And I did see some comments about nerves are okay. Yeah. I would say, Catherine, not to totally contradict, because I do absolutely see where you're coming, and we're all going to be nervous. Heck, I mean, that's just what it is. Most of us hate speaking publicly or in front of a camera, whether it's recorded or live. What I will say is that if your nerves get to the point where you can't convey yourself in a confident way to the audience, you come across as timid or shy or awkward, and that doesn't inspire authority. It doesn't inspire trust. We're already, predispositioned to distrust. And so if your nerves are a hindrance, if your audience is secretly sitting there like, come on, you can do it, I know you can, they're not going to probably take you up on whatever your call to action is, buy this thing or do that or give me a call or whatever.
I mean, we've had a lot of, on all these events, and I've been to a lot of other events, we have things that are called learning exercises. Mm-hmm. We learn that things happen. We just go with the flow. Yeah. And that's just part of the experience. It's like, It's like maybe you're taping an event and you forgot to tape it. So then it's in 5 minutes later. Yeah. Or something happened, and it's happened to all of us. And we just kind of learn from each other about that. And because we're all going through this together, none of us, when we started this, had any idea where this was going to go.
Sure.
None of us did. I mean, you're an expert. You've been in the field for a while, and you may have your ups and downs and things, but you have the experience. All of
Yeah.
us are like, we either worked in corporate, we either worked behind a desk, we had our lives, but it really didn't, we weren't putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, it's a whole different experience. Absolutely. And it is interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember when I first started my business, people would say, I was sort of confronted by this. I'm afraid to put myself out there. Like, do I ever post about things that are not totally business related? I don't know and I'm like, oh, yeah, of course you do. I mean, because that has always been blended for me. I would always share experiences about, my family or my kids that my audience could relate to, or that gave me a connection to somebody that I was interviewing, or a story that we were sharing. And I realized the context is a little bit different. That is much more expected in a news environment, especially on a morning show. But it is scary for most people to bring those two elements together. And I would say even especially so when you're in a more traditional industry. So, insurance, finance, legal, there's been a very hard line for most people in those industries between professional and personal, and the two don't mix. And you have a very prescriptive way about, approaching your marketing or your advertising or your messaging. And now, with everybody being online and digital and personal brand building, like, you're going to have to do a little bit of that, because otherwise you're only going to be talking about your corporate talking points, which are going to be the same as everybody else that works at the same company. So there is a need to differentiate through those sorts of stories.
So Lori, with another question: any tips for introverts for preparation or warm up or after post-mortem?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Lori, you've got tons of good questions, because I too am an introvert and I'm incredibly shy. I still have a tough time going up to people in person and introducing myself and, sharing a little bit about what I do and asking the same question of them. So I do it, but it's not the most pleasant of experiences for me. I fall back on my skills. So to answer your questions, what works, again, for one person, it may not be exactly the right fit for you. And I'm more than happy to talk about this, offline if you want to as well, additionally, for some more personalized assistance. But generally, when people are preparing, your best bet is to have a very clear, reason that you're talking, appearing, whatever it is. Have a very clear message. Generally, I like to call it the 3x3, 3 main points, 3 sub points beneath each thing. Have a sort of soundbite that goes along with it, and a small, depending on how long you're talking, 15 to 75-second story that goes along with those talking points, a back pocket story that you can deploy, and then practice. Don't just look through your slides. If we're using slides, by the way, slides are, I'm not a fan of slides. They're okay for teaching. They're not great for selling. And practice it. Go through top to bottom. If you're really nervous, 10 times from beginning to end, and don't start over when you make a mistake. Figure out how to dig yourself out of whatever that mistake was, because you can guarantee there's going to be a mistake that happens real time in the moment. And if you haven't practiced digging yourself out of whatever hole it is that you dug yourself into, or that technology put you into, you're going to freeze when you're in that moment, and it's going to rattle you, and you're going to become flustered. So practice for preparation, not for perfection. I will tell you that my greatest challenge is the postmortem. And I got great feedback on I'll use Saturday example, because it's the most recent. You knocked it out of the park. This was amazing. Oh my gosh, we're going to work more with you. We have all these projects coming. Let's set up a call, right? I mean, not a single bad piece of feedback or critique or anything. In fact, effusively positive. And what do? I nitpick every single thing that I think I did wrong. They had no idea I did any of that wrong, but I mean, I have dreams about it. I didn't mention this. Oh my gosh, I forgot to talk about AI. I forgot just everything. And that's just probably going to be part of your process. So what I would suggest is don't get too in your head about it. If you have a real struggle with that sort of self-critique, the way that I do, give yourself a day or two. And then if you have a recording at that point, after it's simmered a little bit, go back and watch. And there is probably an area that you find that you could improve upon, whether it's your story or your talking point or your energy level or your eye contact, but don't overwhelm yourself. Pick one of those things to work on and work on that particular skill until you have your next appearance or you create your next video or you host your next webinar or whatever it is. And then you're going to tear yourself to bits for a few days after it, then go back and watch. See if you improved that one skill. And I guarantee you, if you put some time and attention to it, you will see a difference. That builds a little bit of confidence. You got your arms around it, then you move on to the next thing. But again, it is not a one size fits all sort of fix. And it's probably something that you're just going to have to learn to handle a little bit better and be able to compartmentalize a little bit more so that you are not so in your head. That's really the challenge for all of us. We get in our heads.
And this is very true. The people you meet do not know you're introvert or nervous.
Yep.
And that's very true.
Yeah.
I think we can be our own worst enemies. A bunch of us actually met in New York City at the LinkedIn headquarters of the Empire State Building, and we had never met in person. We were a bunch of trainers that had been reaching out for years and years and years. So we got together for the first time. And seeing everyone there, a bunch of us were introverts.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God,
yeah.
just seeing people for the first time. And that was like a wonderful thing. So I definitely recommend people go out there and meet people and get to know people.
I would say too, it's funny that you mentioned, that meetup, if you will, as a way to sort of tackle some of those introverted tendencies, which is fine to be an introvert. You don't want to let it get in the way of your mission or your purpose. I find the same thing happens to me when I'm going to speak at a speaking engagement. And I would say it happens even more now than it did when I was in the news industry. Because when I was in the news industry, I was out of the house every day and I was at a workplace and I was, in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. You can't escape people. And so you're sort of able to tackle that challenge in little bits every single day. Now that I have my own business and I do most of my work from this room in my home, I'm not forced to go out and, face people every single day. So again, I have the skills that I just sort of can deploy on autopilot, but I know that that is something I think about when I'm, again, to use the most recent example, driving down to Philly for a keynote in person with, a whole bunch of people there that I also haven't met before in real life anyway.
How do you handle the work-life balance when you're working in the city or somewhere else? You kind of know exactly what your day is like. You come home. I know when I'm home, I have I'll get started early. I might take a nap during the day. I might work late. My days are all different. So how do you handle the different scheduling that you have?
My schedule in the news industry was always wonky because the prime news anchoring slots are, early in the morning or late at night. So I never had a traditional schedule. And I think that probably helped me a little bit because I had to be very structured. If I was going to spend time with my kids, get my workout in, do whatever else I needed to do, because you're always tired on those crazy schedules, I had to be very disciplined, which I think has served me well now in an environment that I basically structure entirely on my own. I will also say that the news industry is not the most predictable of industries. It's definitely not one where the awning rolls up at 5 p.m. It's a 24/7, 365 industry. So there were plenty of days that I had to go in early and stay late or even stay overnight or, anchor breaking news for 12 hours straight. So that certainly helped me. Now in my own business, and this has taken me a little bit of time to figure out, and I definitely don't have it down perfectly. But I know that I usually block off Mondays and Fridays, and I try and tackle admin calls. If I have a makeup session I have to have with a client or whatever, I try and schedule it for Mondays or Fridays. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are my very much client facing days. So, if we have video shoots or we have training sessions or a media, something or other that's going on, that's where I spend that time. But I have gotten very, very specific about scheduling my calendar. I'm going to be on LinkedIn from 9 to 9:30, Monday through Friday. And it's on my calendar so that nobody can schedule time over that, and I'm going to be on LinkedIn from 12 to 12:15, Monday through Friday. And again, from, 6 to 6:15 p.m., Monday through Friday. I mean, it is in my calendar because if I don't put it there, I will schedule something else over it. Same thing goes for admin work or content creation. My calendar is open for people to book calls. So if I don't block off an hour for content creation, that hour ain't going to be there next time I want to use it. So I've gotten very specific about how I schedule my calendar, and that has helped.
And I block out lots of different things too,
Yeah.
whether it's time that I just need to reset, whether it's other stuff I need to do around the house, whatever it is. Because like you said, if I don't block it out, someone's going to take the time, and then that just, it's not a grr thing, but it's like you make a commitment to do something and then you have to change things up. And that's one of my challenges. I sometimes get stuck in my rut, and I'm so used to being very organized, and I'm not going to go with the flow that easily. And what do I do now, sort of thing. And this is just, I mean, that's me, unfortunately.
Well, it's interesting. I was saying a little bit before the show started, I have 3 kids, 6, 9, and 13. All 3 of them are home today with the stomach bug. I am up to my armpits in barf. And I'm supposed to do a video shoot for the New York Auto Show. It's at the Javits Center on Thursday. And I texted my crew this morning and I was like, listen, I feel fine now, but I don't know how long this thing takes to percolate. So we need to start making some plans for, a backup. If I can't be on air because I'm down with the same thing they have, we need to have. So I have also gotten, I think, a little bit better about communicating in advance and trying to sort of defensively plan, if you will, making sure that I'm communicating effectively with everybody. And that I'm, sort of thinking at least a few days or weeks in advance about, things that could come up, because you're right. When you're in charge of your own schedule and you're not taking your marching orders from a boss, it can be a lot easier for all of that to get very chaotic.
I know. And then there's also family too. I want to be respectful of the family. And it's like, my wife will say, Ken, do you have time now?
Yeah.
Well, technically I do, but I don't. But then.
It's funny. My husband is a pilot, and he also has a non-traditional work schedule. He's very often on call. He flies for Delta out of JFK, and he's home right now, and he'll want to, barge into the office or the sunroom and say, let's talk about blah, blah, blah. Well, I know it looks like I'm not doing anything right now, but consider when that door is closed, it's like I'm in the newsroom. You can't reach me in person unless it's an emergency. But it's like sort of educating in a very kind way, and also recognizing that there's different expectations. Yeah.
I mean, my wife now knows this is the time 1 to 2.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I've actually had my kids. We actually did a family LinkedIn Live because at that point they were looking for jobs.
Oh, so
yeah. Now they're all working and everything, but it was just a really cool conversation.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So, I mean, I remember the one time, I don't know which of your kids was it that came in.
My little guy, Ben. Yeah.
Your little guy, Ben, came in and needed some attention and support, and we just went with the flow.
Yeah. He wanted popcorn specifically.
Okay.
So popcorn was made.
Yep.
Yeah. They don't recognize. Well, my 13 and 9-year-old are a little bit more cognizant of the surroundings, but I was on a live stream 2 Fridays ago, Friday evening, actually, with a Channel 4 viewer who talks to media types just, as part of his show. And Ben was not having any of that. So he actually had to remove me from the stage, if you will, the studio, until I got Ben situated. And then, he brought me back in. But I think we've all gotten as well a little bit more generous with our tolerance of those sorts of things, because especially as small business owners, many of the people that we network with or talk with or see content from, like this, for example, we're all in the same boat. Your kids may be a little bit older, but we all get it.
No, there was a time, even now, we'll have a group chat or a FaceTime thing or something, and it's life. And it's very hard to quantify to someone when you're working like this that you're busy.
Yeah. You don't look busy. You look like you're just sitting there in front of the computer, running your mouth.
Right. But then it's behind the scenes stuff. And then, I think my wife's aunt actually came in one time into the room and said, "Hi, Ken, I have a question to ask you." I'm like, "Aunt Jen, join the call."
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's funny. That reminds me of, this is very early on in my business. And I was doing a client call or a discovery call with the clients, 2 of them actually. And, my mom, who lives in New Jersey, had showed up at my house unannounced, and she just walked in and started talking to me. And I was like, "Oh, just a minute. Hold on, Mom, I'm on a call." That didn't stop her much. She kept on. And I'm like, "Mom, I'm on a client call." "Well, I'm your mother and you should be on a mother call right now." And I'm like, "Oh my God, stand by. Hold on a second. Turn the mic off, turn the camera off, gently escorted her out of the room. And I'm like, I know what it looks like I'm doing is not really work right now, because I'm just talking like I'm having a phone call, but I'm actually doing a live video call right now with a prospective client." So, I mean, listen, we had a giggle about it afterward, both myself and the client. My mother and myself, not so much.
But it makes us human, and it definitely makes us, and that's the thing that I love. I mean, we've had some great conversations, and I look forward to having more with you.
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be on your show.
So, and this is the other thing too. This is Melanie Mitchell Wexler. She has a cat, Mr. Simmons, who makes his presence known during her audio events.
Yeah, I love it. Meow.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we all have our different things there, and, Brenda Miller's husband has joined the call a couple of times because he wants to say hello to her LinkedIn buddies, if you will, because she talks about it a lot. And so it's a frame of reference.
Yeah, absolutely. Get to know who's on the platform and who she's talking to and with.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is such a great, live streams like this and just general networking. It's such an amazing platform, despite the fact that there are occasionally some issues and who knows what's going on with the algorithm right now. But I think it's been such a great resource for, certainly for small business owners. And I don't know that corporate employees were quite as tuned in to the ways to use it even 5 or 6 years ago. But now with, sort of post-pandemic and the way so many of us have brought our presence online, at least in some way, it's gotten to be a much more robust place than I think it was even just a few years ago.
I think the challenge that a lot of us have, and I know I have with my clients, is prioritizing things. There's so much information out there, and there's overload, and you got AI, and you have the multiple algorithms, which none of us can figure out.
Yeah.
And then there's the spam and this and that, and it can be overwhelming. And so you just have to really focus.
I would agree with you. And I think when I first started my business, I didn't know really how to use LinkedIn. I knew I started a profile. I didn't have one prior to that. And I just sort of would post random, promotional videos, or I'm talking here or whatever, those sort of ones that don't get very good engagement. But if you use it effectively, and I would say there's probably some hacks that are good to keep up with in terms of the algorithm, but at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to know what they're changing and when they're changing it and how often it changes. So if you're just continually talking to your audience and sharing, I have found this to be more successful than really anything else, whether it's a video or a text post or a picture post, sharing stories that show that you understand what your your ideal client is going through, like their specific challenges, and there may be many of them, but sharing them in a way, and then also creating content like this, for example, that is just way more raw than a selfie post or a video, but it's, to use a word that's been somewhat bastardized, it's authentic. It is, right? And that's where live anything shines.
I mean, I'm going through health challenges now, and I have no problem putting them out there. I mean, within the context of things, but I basically say, if I don't get back to you right away, there may be a reason for it.
Yeah.
And it's just it's something I choose to do, but not everyone chooses to do that. But it's putting myself out there in a way that I feel, excuse the word, authentic.
Yeah.
Because it's who I am.
Yep. It's so interesting that you mentioned that. I had a question last week about, what does authenticity even mean? Like, what is it? And it has been, I think, commandeered, at least on certain social media platforms, maybe not quite as much on LinkedIn, but certainly on like Instagram and Facebook. It's been sort of slipped on as a marketing tactic. Instead of my Instagram reel going to be a highlight reel, I'm going to share some real life moments that are challenges or struggles or difficulties, but I'm not sharing them with the goal of creating real connection. I'm sharing them because being authentic is a social media marketing trend right now. And that may get you some likes, but it peters out very quickly. In my book, and people may have different definitions of what authenticity means. It means when you show up the same as you would show up in person, or as you would show up anywhere else. It means that when somebody watches your content or your videos on your website or wherever, your blogs, it doesn't sound different than you are in real life. It doesn't sound, you don't look different. You don't use a more buttoned up manner of speech in one situation and are totally loose and freewheeling it in another. It's continuity of who you are in a real way, and sharing strategically also those real moments. It doesn't mean that you have to have a pity party and your audience should feel like your therapist every time you show up on social media, but that you have a reason for sharing something, and it's knowledge, it's education, it's connection, it's whatever it is. And there's continuity no matter where you are.
Like in my case, every Sunday I list my events. So people know about the events. I'm not as concerned about engagement. They know that's there. I'll have different content each day of the week. I may do a follow-up tomorrow about this, but people know when they're going to come to me what to expect. And it may not always be something that resonates, and that's okay. I mean, you can't please everyone all the time.
Oh gosh, that's a recipe for just extreme stress.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the most important thing, is to know what your audience is. And, I've enjoyed watching you and others flourish in things. And I love to support people. And I mean that very sincerely.
I know that you do.
If we don't support each other, then who else is going to support us?
And likewise, I have enjoyed watching your live streams and connecting after I started my business and helping one another and, creating content together and sharing networks, etc. It's been really, really cool.
So I want to thank you very much for the opportunity today. Take care of, maybe you want to get back to your kids and make sure they're
not really.
No, not really.
No, in fact, I'm gonna I'm still on the call, kids. 5:00 tonight. Sorry, it's still going. I appreciate the time. I always love chatting with you, and your audience is always so awesome. They're super engaged. And
yes, and I'm going to be following with them in a bit too. So thanks a lot very much, Kerry. Have a great day.
You do the same. Talk to you soon.
Bye.